So yeah, let me start recording. There we go. So graphing assignment due next Thursday at midnight. I'm going to talk about it at the end of class today. I'll give you some guidance on it, on setting it up. Let's see. No, Thursday at midnight. No, like literally like, sorry, Thursday. I'm not trying to trick anybody. It's due next Thursday at 11:59. Okay. It's due next Thursday at 11:59. Again, it says it in several different places now. So yeah. Okay. All right. So any other questions? Let's see. Okay. Okay. So today we're talking about price discrimination. Price discrimination. So let's start off with the split. Okay. So aside from British food being really disgusting, why do restaurants use children's menus? Why do you think restaurants use children's menus? Think about it. Let's see. Give it a sec. For children. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Oh, it's talking about incentives. You're thinking like an economist. Good. So yeah, so using the term incentive, very nice, because we know that people respond to incentives, right? That's one of the basic assumptions of economics, right? Picky eater kids, incentive for smaller portions for smaller individuals, right? Yep. It saves them from wasting food. That will, yep. That child was me as a kid. Exactly. Yeah, I was ordering off the adult menu. I was a chunky boy. I was ordering off the adult menu since I was like 6. But yeah, so it gives people an incentive to bring their children. We know that children generally eat less food, right? All good answers. Exactly. Some of their own. Okay, interesting. Maybe the parents give the kids a little bit of bite of their own food, right? Good. Yeah, so these are all correct ideas. And so yeah, it makes the restaurant seem family friendly, right? There's some kind of different kind of elasticity in response to children's prices, right? We want those families that might have different willingnesses to pay. Maybe they don't want to pay full price. Maybe they're not as likely to bring their kids. Give them the children's menu, they're more likely to bring their kids. And so we get the whole family in, right? Okay, good. So, why they do it, just like what you said, they waste food, parents with children might be more sensitive to prices than adults without children. If parents have to pay full price for the food their children won't finish, maybe the parents bring them to a different restaurant, right? So all good points. There's no theory here, so this isn't a slide you need to really write down. But we call this price discrimination. So this is price discrimination. So what is price discrimination? Price discrimination is charging different prices for the same good or service. Simple as that. Okay. And so I want you to recall from earlier in the semester that demand curves represent the willingness to pay for different consumers. What if we could differentiate now between the different willingnesses to pay of different groups of consumers? Families with kids, families without kids, seniors, students, right? Different groups of consumers might have different willingnesses to pay depending on what their needs are, how much income they have, what their preferences are, right? And so if we're a profit maximizing business, we can make more money by raising prices on certain consumers that can pay more and lowering it on others and capturing markets for people who have lower willingnesses to pay, right? And as long as we're charging at or above our marginal cost, we can do that reasonably. We can profit off that, right? So we can discount people as long as we can, as long as it's higher than the marginal cost of production, you can give discounts to people that otherwise you wouldn't get business from, right? And so we have to assume that a price discriminating firm has monopoly power, right? That's the first part. Doesn't mean it's a pure monopoly. It just has to have some level of monopoly power, and in turn must have some market power. Okay, so we're not going to see this in perfectly competitive firms, all right? We're not going to see it. So there are three types of price discrimination, very easy to remember. First degree, second degree, third degree. And we're going to talk about each one individually. Any questions so far? All right. So first degree, it's called perfect price discrimination. Now, first degree is very hard to do, okay? It's when you charge a different price for every unit consumed. So literally, you're charging every consumer their maximum willingness to pay. Very hard to do. How could you know? Right? It'd be really hard to know what someone's maximum willingness to pay is. Maybe you can get close to it if you do an auction with bids, right? You can kind of get close to that. And so that means, looking at this graph, like the Qth unit, it's kind of hard to see. I apologize. It means that when we sell the Qth unit, maybe that's the 100th unit, we literally charge P for that unit. But for the Q1th unit, we charge P1. And for the Q2th unit, we charge P2. So you're literally charging the exact maximum willingness to pay off of the demand curve for each unit. So if you're selling 100 units, you're charging a different price for every single one. It's very hard to do. If you were to do that, you'd capture all the consumer surplus. Why? Well, think about it. If my willingness to pay is $100 and you charge me $100, I don't get any consumer surplus. If your willingness to pay is 70 and the business charges you 70, you don't get any consumer surplus. So by doing that, the business is able to capture all the consumer surplus in the market. It also means that they're going to be producing the socially optimal quantity. They're going to produce the same level of production that a perfectly competitive firm would. But they capture all the consumer surplus. So consumers would get no surplus. They'd all be paying the exact amount that is the most they'd be willing to pay. Now, this is very hard to do, like I said. So there are more common examples. One that you're already familiar with is second degree. Something like a bulk discount is second degree price discrimination. This is where you charge based on quantity. So you're not charging a different price for every single unit. You're charging different prices based on chunks of quantity. So these are things like bulk discounts. So notice, I took this picture when I was at Mario's Fishbowl the other day. Notice that 25 wings costs $26.50. 100 wings costs $88. So the more wings you buy, the less it is for each wing. That is a form of second degree price discrimination. Charging less per unit as someone buys more of something. This is very common. If maybe you buy something like a protein powder on Amazon, and you see that if you subscribe to get a shipment once a month, you get a discount. Or if you agree to get 5 every month, you get an even bigger discount. So that's second degree price discrimination. The other thing I actually wanted to point out, the reason I originally took this picture is because they put this message on the menu. Or they actually gave this out in addition to the menu. Due to changes in the chicken wing market, we're dealing with record increased costs. So the supply curve in the chicken wing market has shifted left, right? And so the equilibrium price of chicken wings has gone up. A dozen wings at Mario's used to be $10.50. Now it's $13.50. What's really interesting about this is it shows you how prices take time to adjust because of something called menu costs. They didn't print a new menu. They just threw down a piece of paper and laminated it, and printed out a bunch of those, and they give them to people. The price of chicken wings went up years ago. Mario's is just catching up now, okay, which is kind of interesting because it takes time for prices to adjust. Now, the fact that the price went up is not price discrimination. The price discrimination here is the fact that anywhere you go, the more wings you buy, the cheaper each wing is. That's second degree price discrimination. All right. So any questions about that? That's second degree price discrimination. Third degree, also very common. This is probably the most common, to be honest. This is when you charge different consumer types different prices. So this would be like children's and senior discounts for movie tickets. We assume that seniors have a lower willingness to pay, so we charge them less. Now, why is that? Well, we assume that seniors are a bit more frugal or stingy, whatever you want to call it. I never had a 20-year-old argue with me over 5 cents when I worked at a coffee shop, but I had a baby boomer argue with me over that, actually a penny once. So we assume that seniors, are a little bit more frugal for a few reasons. Behaviorally older people are just more frugal generally, but also they're living off Social Security. Maybe they have less income, right, than a middle-aged person would have. Same with students. Students and seniors probably are on the lower end of the income distribution, whereas we notice that people earn the most in their 40s and 50s, right? That's just what happens. So when you're a student and when you're a senior, your willingness to pay for things is generally lower. And so we give people discounts. We give student discounts, senior discounts, etc. Okay. Now, our children's menu is actually an example. They're kind of a weird example because the food on the children's menu is not exactly the same good. It is a smaller portion. So they're not the best example, but it's still a tangent example. But movie tickets are the best example because the cost of putting a child in a movie seat if you're the theater versus putting an adult, it's identical. The marginal cost of filling that seat is the same, whether it's a child or an adult. But we charge less for a children's ticket because we want families to come. We charge less for a senior ticket because we know seniors are not willing to pay as much. We charge less for a daytime ticket because demand is lower for daytime movie showings. You get the matinee discount. These are all forms of third-degree price discrimination. And you can see that this is very common. In reality, there's really no such thing as a single price monopoly. Everybody, every firm with some kind of monopoly power is charging different prices to different market segments. Windows 10 Education Edition is free for you. I just installed it on a computer that I just built, and it's free for me because the school buys the licenses in bulk at a discount. The fact that the school can buy the Windows 10 Home or Education Edition licenses at a discount is both second degree because they're buying in bulk and third degree because they're getting an education discount. A business professional edition of Windows 10 is $200. Home edition is $100. The differences are very minute. The difference between Windows 10 Home, Windows 10 Education, Windows 10 Professional, marginally very little difference. But Windows 10 Professional is so much more expensive because businesses are going to pay more. They're willing to pay more. Okay. Student discounts, third degree, right? Because students have less money. So any questions about any of this? This is price discrimination. Very common. Okay. All right. So how can firms do this? So first, they have to identify different market segments, such as students and seniors, right? They have to be able to identify that they have different types of buyers. Segments must have different elasticities of demand. So the responsiveness to price has to be the same, has to be different, right? Students respond to price changes differently than 45-year-olds who are salaried, right? They respond to price changes differently than seniors who are living off Social Security. So to have different market segments, to have these different demands, we have to assume that they have different elasticities, different responsiveness to price. The markets have to be kept separate somehow, okay? So Windows 10 Education Edition, if you weren't getting it for free through WVU, if we went to a school that didn't have a deal with Windows, it would cost like $50, as opposed to $100 for Home Edition. Now, how do we separate the market? You have to show that you have a student or an education email address to get Windows 10 Education Edition. So Microsoft can actually, at low cost, enforce this market segmentation. You go to a diner, a senior can be easily identified just by how they look, or if it's on the, on the margin, you could check an ID, right? So clearly it's very low cost to give a senior discount because you can tell when someone's a senior. There can't be any seepage between the markets. So what does that mean? A senior citizen cannot go into IHOP and get discounted pancakes and then sell them to me at my table, right? That would be absurd. And IHOP would kick them out, right? So there can't be any seepage, or else the prices would converge, right? So we can't have a situation where I can go in, get the student discount, and then, sell it to a non-student at the regular price. If that could happen, if that were easy to do, then you couldn't have proper price discrimination. But there's a cultural tab. It would just be bizarre if a senior went into IHOP and started buying pancakes and then selling them to people outside. They'd just get kicked out, right? And so IHOP can properly price discriminate and give seniors a discount because there isn't any seepage. And so again, it can't be too costly to enforce the price discrimination. So when it comes to a senior discount, a student discount, it's very easy to look at somebody. It's very easy to check an ID. The cost of price discrimination is near zero in that case. Okay, it's near zero. Any questions? I'll, just in case anybody's too shy. And so again, firms have to have some level of monopoly power to do this, okay? All right, keep it rolling. So what are the advantages for the firm? Well, better profit maximization, right? You can figure out willingness to pay of different markets. You can separate your prices. You can get more buyers, right? Maybe, maybe some restaurant that offers a senior discount can drastically increase the number of people that come in the door if they give that senior discount. And usually the senior discount, they're still charging above the marginal cost of what the food costs. So as long as they can price discriminate and they're still charging a price that's above marginal cost, they're still adding to their profits. So it's better profit maximization. Economies of scale. Ultimately, what we see happen under price discrimination is quantity of output increases. So instead of charging one price, charging different prices to different markets allows the firm to produce more, which means that if it's getting economies of scale, its economies of scale are getting even better because economies of scale with production. Efficient use of infrastructure. So this one was in there. It's kind of a weird one to think about, but when you think about, if there were like a commuter discount on the subway, you could get more people using the subway, or maybe a midday discount, for when there's not a lot of demand, right? Commuter discount would be kind of weird because that's when demand is highest. So more like if there's like a midday discount on the transit system, maybe buses are cheaper in the middle of the day when there's less commuting, gets more people using them, which means we're using the infrastructure. Better use of space, right? Firms can clear inventory more quickly. Overstock discounts and sales. That's a form of price discrimination. Who's being discriminated against? Well, the people that bought the thing right away, right? We think of this as like time dynamic pricing, right? If something's on the shelf for a long time, they cut the price a little to get people to come in and buy it. Maybe a used car shop, is about to get a new shipment of cars in. They cut the prices on their current stock so they can rotate the inventory. That's good for the people that waited. Manages the flow of customers. This is a really interesting one. Think about something like the matinee discount at a movie theater. When's everybody going to the movie theater? Friday night and Saturday night. That's when demand is highest. So that's when the highest price should be charged. And that's what they do. Friday night and Saturday night, movie tickets are the most expensive. Wednesday afternoon, not many people are going to the movie theater. Monday morning, not many people are going to the movie theater. So what do? They offer a discount because people's willingness to pay for a Monday at noon movie is lower than it is at Friday night. There's less people, there's fewer people going. And so they can manage the crowd better by lowering the price in periods of low demand to get some of those Friday night people, maybe on the margin, will say, hey, the trade-off is there. I can save $10 and go see the movie on a Wednesday. It's better management of crowds. Early bird special at the diner. You get all the old folks in at 6 a.m. That spreads out the breakfast rush. Instead of everybody coming in at 8 and 9, we get some people come in at 6 and 7. Okay. Nice. So advantages for the consumer, maybe you're the consumer who gets the discount, so you might get a lower price. There are also some positive externalities depending on what the good might be. So for example, if a private school, instead of charging one price, can charge based on income, and some schools do this, charging based on income, they might charge the wealthier students a higher price for tuition because they're willing to pay more and they're able to pay more. And then with that, they can finance educations for low-income individuals. And so price discrimination, if done properly, so to speak, might make it so people with higher incomes and higher willingness to pay more, and people with lower incomes pay less. And so something like a private school, they might be able to provide more education to low-income people because the higher income people are paying more. Now, of course, it's bad for the higher income people and better for the lower income people. So it's a trade-off. It's a transfer of wealth. But there's also a positive externality because more people educated creates positive externalities for society, right? Any questions? All right. So again, firm produces more of the good, ultimately, okay? Which means there's less deadweight loss from underproduction. Now, we might be reducing consumer surplus, but we're also reducing deadweight loss because deadweight loss comes from underproduction when there are no externalities, right? We get deadweight loss from overproduction if there are negative externalities. But ultimately, assuming no externalities here, firms of monopoly power produce less than the socially optimal amount. If they can price discriminate and charge different prices to different markets, they end up producing more. And so we get less deadweight loss. Okay. So what are some disadvantages? Well, you might have the exploitation of captive markets, right? You don't want to be buying snacks at the movie theater, right? We probably charge high in a lot of transit systems. They charge higher ticket prices at 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. If you're a commuter, that's when you have to take the transit system. So price discrimination does not benefit you, but it benefits the people who are just, riding the subway to get lunch at noon in the city. They get to pay a lower price. You pay a higher price. So ultimately, if you're the person who has to pay more, you don't benefit from price discrimination. Okay? But ultimately, price discrimination alleviates some of the inefficiencies created by monopoly. If Microsoft could only charge one single price for Windows 10, we would not have nearly as many copies of Windows 10 floating around in our computer ecosystem as we do. But like 90% of computers in existence right now, well, a lot of them might be on Windows 7 as well, but 90% of new computers right now have Windows 10 on them, okay? Because they're able to charge different prices depending on what the needs are. They can do those bulk discounts to Dell. When Dell produces a batch of, 1,000,000 laptops, Windows can just sell them a big bulk batch of Windows 10 keys. But then when you need Windows 10 Home for your computer, you might have to pay a different price. And so this means that we get a lot more copies of Windows 10 than we would if Microsoft could only charge one price for Windows 10 no matter what. So that's the idea. Okay. Any questions about that? Okay. So last, I'm going to end on this last slide called arbitrage. We're going to talk real quick about arbitrage, and then I'm going to give you some guidance on the graphing assignment. So arbitrage is when you buy a product in a market at a low price and resell it in a higher price market. So, for example, I know that even adjusted for exchange rates, AAA video games are about $60 in the United States. They're about $40, again, adjusting for exchange rates, $40 in countries like Cambodia. So in low-income countries, these massive video game production companies sell for less. $40 for the newest Call of Duty game as opposed to $60 in the United States. So if I were to go, so that's because, so price discrimination occurs between different economies, right? Because people in lower income countries cannot pay as much. But the marginal cost of producing another disc of Modern Warfare is like 10 cents, right? But you sell it to people for $60, right? But in Vietnam, they'll sell it for $40. Now, if I were to go to Vietnam and buy 1,000 copies of Madden 2021 and then bring them to the US and sell them, that would be arbitrage. What arbitrage does is it actually regulates prices between markets. Because if I buy something where it's cheap, I'm adding to demand. And if I sell it where it's expensive, I'm adding to the supply. So you can see that arbitrage actually pushes prices to it pushes prices to converge. So I go and buy it where it's cheap, which adds to demand, which puts upward pressure on the price. And then I bring it to somewhere where it's expensive and sell it, which puts downward pressure on the price. That's arbitrage. And so arbitrage can be useful in keeping prices relatively equal across different economies. And arbitrage is possible in some cases because of price discrimination. Any questions about that? All right. Just in case, I'll open it up real quick, and then I'm going to move on and just give you some tips on the graphing assignment. All right, no questions. Okay, so let's shift to the board. Let's stop screen sharing. Okay. If I write on this board, would everybody be able to see it? Everybody? Okay. So, do an angle. Okay. So I want you to think back to high school algebra, where you had y equals f of x. So what does this mean? It means that y is a function of x. I plug in an x, and it spits out a y value. So let's say that f of x equals 2x plus 1. Okay. Well, if x were equal to 1, then this should be 2 times 1, 2, plus 1 equals 3. What if x were equal to 2? It would be 2 times 2, 4, plus 1 equals 5. If x were equal to 3, This will come out to 7. If x were equal to 4, it would come out to 9. Notice that each time I add 1 to x, it adds 2 to the value of the function, to the value of y, right? So now what I want you to think about is total cost as a function of quantity. When you think about total cost as a function of quantity. And so let's say that total cost as a function of quantity is 2q plus 1. Let's even make it a little more complicated and say 2q squared. Now that square sign, now again, I don't want to get too into the calculus of it, but that square sign is going to guarantee that marginal cost increases over time. So here's our total cost function, TC of q equals 2q squared plus 1. Well, there's 2 portions to this, okay? So we have on the left here, the part of the function that varies with the quantity produced. And so, what's this? This is our variable cost. So this is the part of total cost that varies in relation to the quantity. But think about the y-intercept here. What if q were equal to 0? Total cost would equal 1. And so the part that doesn't vary is the fixed cost. And so in this total cost function, we have a variable cost, which is the part that varies with quantity. And we have the fixed cost, which is the part that doesn't change. You're always adding 1, whether you produce anything or not. Okay. Now, what if we wanted to take the averages? What if we wanted to get average variable cost? Well, average variable cost, let me here. AVC would be the variable cost, 2q squared, divided by q. Can everybody see that? So it'd be the variable cost divided by q. What about the fixed cost? Well, the fixed cost is 1. So average fixed cost would be 1 divided by q. So I have this total cost function. I've split it up into my variable cost and my fixed cost. And average variable cost is just taking the variable cost and dividing it by the quantity. Average fixed cost is taking the fixed cost and dividing it by the quantity. So I've split this up. I have my total cost, and now I have average variable cost, average fixed cost. What if I wanted to get average cost or average total cost? Well, that's very easy as well. I could take the initial total cost function and divide it by q, or now that I've done that for both variable and fixed, I could just add them together. Average total cost, or, again, you might see it written as AC, it's the same thing, is 2q squared over q. Well, what is that? 2q squared over q. That's 2q. If you have q squared over q, you subtract the exponents. So we get 2q. Now, again, this is some basic algebra. You may have to brush up on it if you forget some of this stuff, okay? 2q plus 1 over q. This is my average total cost. 2q plus 1 over q. So now I've split it all up. There's one more thing I need that you're actually given in the graphing assignment. You don't have to solve it yourself. If you have taken calculus and you think of marginal cost as the change in total cost with respect to quantity, then you would use the power rule and you could say that marginal cost equals 4Q. Now, because you're not expected to have taken calculus yet, you're given the marginal cost on the graphing assignment. Now that you have ATC, AVC, AFC, and MC, all of those can be graphed on the same chart together. And so you just need to think of Q as being X and Y as being price or cost, the money part, right? And so any questions about that? So that's it. I mean, once you get that down, that's most of the assignment. And then you're just plugging in. So it's like if I said Q was 2, marginal cost would be 8. If Q was 2, AFC would be 1/2. If Q was 2, AVC would be, no, this is 2Q, right? AVC would be 4. If Q was 2, ATC would be 4 plus 1/2, 4.5. And so you're given a chart where there's some quantities on it. And once you have your functions, you're just plugging in different quantities. And once you have that quantity, once you have that X, it spits out a Y, which is your cost, whether it's marginal cost or average total cost or average variable cost or average fixed cost. If I had a price, I could get total revenue, right? So all you're doing is just think back to high school algebra. You're just plugging in values for X and it spits out Y values, which are the costs. Okay, any questions about that? In case somebody's too shy, I guess there's still an answer, a question prompt open, but any questions? That's most of the graphing assignment. And then you're just drawing it. You're setting up coordinates, just an XY coordinate system, just like you did in high school algebra 2. That's it. Any questions? All right, well, if you have any more questions, you can ask on Monday or Wednesday. Enjoy your weekends.